Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our lecture series. This is for principles of, our topic is on the principles of high quality classroom assessment. And for those of you who are not enrolled in my class and are viewing this live stream via YouTube, welcome. If you want to learn something about assessment and learning, then you may join us also. And to my students, you may just ask questions, if you have questions, by just typing your questions dito sa ating chat box. So once I see them, I will answer your question, okay? So I think we should start. So let's continue with our previous discussion. We started this before already. So we're just going to continue with the principles of high quality assessment. I think we discussed about validity of a test. So we're just going to continue on this topic. Okay, we discussed already about how are we going to establish the validity of the test. And we have the first one, which is the face validity, okay, by just merely looking at the physical appearance of the test instrument. And then we also have content or curricular related validity, and we can establish this by ensuring that the test objectives match that of the lesson objectives. And these are ways on how are you going to establish content validity of a test. We have criterion. I think we discussed this already or not yet. Okay, so we have criterion related validity. Established statistically such that a set of scores revealed by measuring instrument is correlated with the scores obtained in another external predictive measure. So for criterion validity, it provides validity by relating an assessment to some valued measure, okay, or criterion that can either provide an estimate of current performance, which is what we call concurrent validity, or predict future performance, which is predictive validity. Now, what is predictive validity? Okay, we can establish this by correlating sets of scores obtained from two measures given at a longer time interval in order to describe the future performance of an individual. So there are two measures. First measure is given, and then there is a longer interval before the second measure is given. And the results of this will be correlated, and the result of the correlation will help us predict the future performance of an individual. Okay, so we will be able to tell, okay, or to make a prediction if, say, a student will do good in a future exam, or will pass a future exam, or will fail a future exam. Okay, that's what we call predictive validity. And then we also have concurrent validity. This is established by correlating the sets of scores obtained from two measures given concurrently in order to describe the present status of the individual. So for predictive, there is a longer interval. For concurrent, the two measures are given concurrently. Okay, so this will help us describe the present status of the individual. Okay. All right, so that's criterion-related validity. Now we move on to construct-related validity. So for construct validity or related validity, it determines which assessment is a meaningful measure of an observable trait or characteristics like intelligence, reading, comprehension, honesty, motivation, attitude, learning style, anxiety, and so on. And we can establish this by statistically comparing psychological factors that affect the scores in a test. Okay, so we will make use of a statistical test so we can compare the effect of some psychological factors in a test. So there are two ways on how construct-related validity is established. We have the first one, which is convergent validity, and the other one is divergent validity. So what is convergent validity? This is established if an instrument defines another similar trait other than what it is intended to measure. Okay, so for example, I have a mathematics anxiety test. I could correlate this with the result of the attitudinal test. So see, in our example, there are two instruments and we can correlate them, okay? So we can establish what we call convergent validity. The other one is divergent validity. Establish if an instrument can describe only the intended trait and not the other trait. Okay, for convergent, we have an instrument that could define a similar trait other than what is intended to measure. For divergent, the instrument can describe only the intended and not the other traits. So, for example, we have critical thinking tests, and this may not be correlated with your language ability tests. Okay, so that's divergent and convergent validity under construct-related validity. Now we move on to reliability of a test. So before we move on to reliability, guys, I just want to remind you that if you have questions, you can just type your questions in. And once I see them on my screen, I'm going to answer your questions. Okay, so let's proceed now to reliability of a test. Reliability refers to how dependably or consistently a test measures a characteristics. So for example, if a person takes the tests again, will he or she get a similar test score or a much different score? Okay, so that's just one way of understanding what reliability is. For example, a person takes a test now and then takes the test again. Will he or she get a similar test score or a different score? Okay, because a test that yields similar scores for a person who repeats the test is said to have or is said to measure a characteristic reliably. Okay, so if it will yield a similar score from the first time he or she took the test, then we can say that it passed the reliability tests. Okay, now um, reliability of a test is affected by inconsistency of the scorer as a result of subjective scoring. Okay, so if the scorer, for example, is not consistent with the way how he or she scores a given test, then when a student takes the tests for the second time, it may yield a different score. Okay, this usually happens for performance-based tests or tests that involves, for example, essay. Okay, if your teacher does not use any rubric, for example, in grading your work or your performance, then there is a higher chance that there is an inconsistency of the test result, okay, which violates what we call reliability of the tests. Another one is incidental and accidental exclusion of some materials in the tests, resulting to limited sample. Okay, so sometimes your teachers would forget to include some important topics in the tests. Okay, so this may now affect the reliability of the tests. Okay, your scores, I mean. Now, number three, change in the individual examinee himself and his instability during the examination. Okay, so meron mga ganyan na cases when you took the tests and you are not psychologically ready, or maybe you are sick while taking the test, then it may affect your score. Okay, and then of course the testing environment. Okay, that's why it's imperative that when you are administering a tests, it should be in a place, if it's a physical face-to-face test, for example, in a place that is conducive to learning. Okay, and in our case now, it's an online. Most of our examinations are, most of the tests are being given online. The results of the test may be affected also by the students' what do you call this? Internet connection. Okay, kung parang usad pagong yung kanyang internet connection, especially if the exam is timed, then these factors, okay, may greatly affect the result of the tests. Okay, so those are the things that may affect the reliability of a test. So just like validity, reliability of an assessment method can be established in several ways. Okay, so the length of the test difficulty, the objectivity of the scorer. So these are the things that we need to look into. So statistically, we can also establish test reliability using the following. Okay, if you want to make use of statistical analysis, we can make use of the following to establish the reliability of the tests. But of course, just like what I said, we can establish reliability of an assessment method by looking into the length of the tests, the difficulty of the test. It should be balanced. Okay, not all items are very difficult. Okay, because all items are very difficult, then the reliability of the test will be affected, and of course the objectivity of the scorer. But we're going to discuss about establishing test reliability using statistics. So we have the first one, the test-retest method, or test of stability. Then we have parallel or equivalent form, or test of equivalence. And then we have the test-retests. We also have split half method, and then the Kuder-Richardson method. So let's take a look at them one by one. We start with test-retest method. So how is this done? This is done by administering a test twice to the same group with time interval between tests. Okay, so the results of the tests will be subjected to Pearson R correlation. Okay, so the higher the value of R, the higher the correlation is, the more stable the tests. Okay, so again, for test retest, from the name itself, there are two tests which will be administered. There's a test that will be administered twice to the same group with time interval between tests. Okay, so we have the second one, parallel or equivalent form. This is done by administering parallel forms of test to the same group in close succession. Okay, The results are subjected to Pearson R correlation. So that's how you're going to do it. And then, like what I said, the higher the value of R, the higher the correlation, and the more, okay, um, reliable the test is. Okay, so how do we do this? First, let's try to understand what do we mean by parallel tests. Okay, two tests are said to be parallel when the questions are constructed in a manner where the content or the type of item, the difficulty, should be similar but not identical. Okay, take note. There are two. You're going to administer two tests. Okay, so we have the first test and then we have the second tests. Okay, so these two tests are called parallel if the questions in the first test are similar to the questions in the second test, but they are not the same or identical. So for example, let us say there are two groups of test takers A and B. Item number one, for example, in a math tests for the first group A, has this question. So ang question niya is, what is the sum? Let me type this on the screen for you. So you'll see. Okay. Okay, so for example, for the first group, the question is, what is the sum of 5 and 12? Okay. Now, to come up with a parallel question for section B, since we are talking about parallel form, the question can be stated in in a different way. Not the same item, but in a different way, but it measures the same skill. Okay? So the skill that is being measured for the question which I flashed on your screen is in adding whole numbers. Okay? So if I will make a parallel question for the other group, then I could change that into a different item, but still measures the same skill, which is adding whole numbers. So what is the result when 8 and 11 are added? So see, two different questions, but the same skills that are being measured. Okay, and the same level of difficulty. So these two questions are said to be parallel. Okay, so I hope that's clear at this point. Okay, there are still some of you guys who are saying hi to me and good afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon to all of you and welcome to this lecture series. It's like what I said, if you do not belong to this class, you are still welcome to join me and probably listen and learn something about tests if this interests you. But if it does not interest you, you may just leave our live stream. Okay, especially to my YouTube friends. Maybe some of you are watching this live um, lecture series for my class. Okay, so I think we need to proceed to the next. We have test retest with equivalent forms. So this method is performed by administering parallel forms of a test to the same group with increased time interval. So how do this differ with the first two? Okay, so for the second one, yung parallel form, we administer the two tests, parallel forms of tests in closed succession. Okay. In test retest with equivalent forms, we administer the parallel forms of tests to the same group with increased time interval. Mas mahaba yung time interval between the two forms. Okay, so once we're done doing that, okay, we check the papers and tabulate the scores. Then after that, we're going to compare the scores of the first group and the other group and the second group using Pearson R correlation. Okay, next we have split half method. So this is done by administering a test once, and then we're going to score equivalent halves of the test. Okay, how do we determine the equivalent halves? Okay, we can do even and odd numbered items. Okay, or it could be the half, the first 25 and the last 25 items. Okay, just make sure that we're going to divide the tests into two halves, okay, or half. Okay, so example natin dito is even and odd numbered items. All right, so again, the result will be subjected to Pearson R correlation. I'm not going to discuss to you on how are we going to perform Pearson R correlation, because I think this was already discussed in your other math subjects. Okay, but if you want to know more about Pearson R correlation, you can also join my lecture series for elementary statistics and probability. Okay, and we have the last, the Kuder-Richardson method. So this is a measure of what we call internal consistency. Okay, this is done by administering a test once, and then we're going to correlate the proportion percentage of the students passing and not passing a given time. So if in split half method, we divide the total number of items into two, in Kuder-Richardson's, we're talking about correlating the proportion percentage, okay, of the number of students who passed the test and the number of students who, the item, I mean, and the number of students who did not answer the item correctly. And then we're going to use the Kuder-Richardson formula 20 and 21 to test the measure of internal consistency. Okay, so that's how we establish reliability of a test using statistical analysis. Okay, so by now, you already have an idea on why these two are important characteristics of high-quality classroom assessment. Okay, so now you might ask me, how these two differ, or is there a relationship between the two, validity and reliability? Now, to distinguish validity and reliability, we can think of two weighing scales. A weighing scale that is set to 0, 0, and a weighing scale that is set to 0, 1. Okay, so how are we going to use this to explain the relationship or the difference of the two? Okay, so let's say if I will take, for example, my weight today using this weighing scale, which is set to 0, 0, and it will read 90 kilograms, but I'm not 90 kilograms. I wish not. So it says 90 kilograms, and then after a week, or after a day maybe, after a day, I'll take my weight again, and it's 90 again. And then the next day, I'll take it again, and it's 90. Okay, or maybe there's a slight difference, but I would say that this weighing scale is giving me a reliable reading because it's giving me the same reading whenever I take my weight. Okay, of course, assuming that I did not gain weight. Okay, of course, that's our assumption. Okay, so it gives me the same weight reading, which is 90 kilograms, whenever I take my weight for 3 consecutive days. Then I could say that that this one is giving me a valid, a reliable, I mean, okay? And at the same time, it's also a valid reading of my weight, because we know that this weighing scale works perfectly fine. It's set to 0, 0. Now, we go to the next weighing scale. So unknowingly, you took your weight. You didn't know that the starting value is at 0, 1 kilogram. So you took your weight and it reads 91 kilograms. Then the next day you took again, it says 91 kilograms. Then the next day you took again, it says 91 kilograms. So since you are getting the same weight measure for 3 consecutive days, again, assuming that you did not gain any weight or lose any weight, we can say that the reading being given by this weighing scale is also reliable. Okay. However, the weight reading being given by this weighing scale is not valid. Why? Because the starting value is at 0, 1 kilogram. So your actual weight is not 91 kilograms, but it's actually 90 kilograms. So that means that a valid test is always reliable, just like in our weighing scale explanation. Okay, so since the reading being given by this weighing scale on the left is valid, then automatically it is reliable. However, a reliable test is not always valid. This is true to the second weighing scale. We got a reliable weight measure, which is 91, but the weight is not valid because the actual weight is 90 kilograms. So remember, again, that a valid test is not always reliable, while a reliable test, I'm sorry, a valid test is always reliable, while a reliable test is not always valid. Okay, so do you guys have questions at this point? From those who are watching this live stream, if you have questions related to this topic, then I'll do my best to answer your question. Okay, so again, if you guys have questions, just type in your questions, and once I see them, I'm going to answer them. Okay, so I think there are no questions at this point. Yeah, no questions. So we proceed now to the other principles of high quality classroom assessments. Okay, so we have fairness, practicality and efficiency, continuity, and positive consequences. So these are the other four principles of high quality assessment. I think I wasn't able to prepare a slide for each one of them, but I'm going to explain them one by one. So we start first with fairness. Okay. When we talk about fairness, a fair assessment, when do we say that an assessment is fair? So a fair assessment provides equal opportunities to students to demonstrate their achievement. Okay, so it usually pertains to the intent that each question should be made as clear as possible to the examinees, and the test is free from biases. Okay? So that's what fairness mean. Hindi yung there are things that you need to clarify but you did not tell that to your students, then that's not being fair. Okay? So the tests should be free from biases. Okay? Fairness in assessment can all be achieved by making sure that students are aware of the learning targets to be assessed. You know, this is the reason why it is really important, okay, and to communicate to the students the assessment objectives as reflected in your table of specifications, okay? So we have to ensure that the learners know what to be measured prior to the administration of the tests. That is why of your teachers are giving you pointers to review. Okay, actually, those pointers are not even enough because they would just tell you review this, blah blah blah, but they will not tell you how many items will be taken from that specific topic. Okay, so as a future teacher, you have to see to it that you communicate to your students to be what are the things to be measured in the tests. Okay, and also we all under fairness, um, teachers, okay, must see to it that the learners possess the necessary prerequisite knowledge and skills, and that all assessment tasks and procedures are not biased. Okay, this is where most of the students um, how do you call this? Are really why most of the students are sometimes pissed with their teachers because they sometimes find items in the test which were not even discussed in the class. Okay, especially during face-to-face classes. So you cannot include something or you cannot measure something wherein the students does not have or do not have the prerequisite knowledge and skills to answer that test item. Okay, because that would be very unfair on their part. Okay, so that's fairness. Okay, we move on to the next. We have practicality and efficiency. A good assessment method is one that considers practicality and efficiency. So when we are designing a test, we must consider one. So these are the things that we need to consider when we are designing a test under practicality and efficiency. Okay, of course um, we have to consider. I mean the familiarity of the teacher to the method being used. Okay. This is under practicality and efficiency. Familiarity of the teacher with the chosen method. Okay. If you're going to choose a method, I mean assessment method that you are not really familiar with, and you are trying to experiment on your class, then chances are you might be wasting a lot of time, okay, along the way. Okay. So it's advisable to just use something that you are familiar with, okay? Because it may cause confusion later on if you're going to use a method that you haven't tried yet or that you're not really familiar with. And it may cause some misunderstanding between you and your students later on. Okay, since you are not familiar with the method, you failed, for example, to lay ground rules for that method, and then along the way you discover that there are loopholes, so you will be in big trouble. Okay, so you have to use a method that you are aware of, okay, or familiar with. You need to know the strengths and the weaknesses of the method you're using, okay, and most importantly, um, especially for methods that are a bit complicated and new, teacher must know how to must try to pilot test the method to a group of students or fellow teachers, probably, okay, to help you um, get used to the said method. Okay, so that's under practicality and efficiency. We have the second one. It's called the time required. This is also important. When you are administering a test, you also have to consider the time required. Teachers should choose assessment methods that require short amount of time but provides reliable and valid results. Okay, so be aware of the time required for your tests. Sometimes we have teachers who would give you a 100 item tests, and majority of these items are difficult and they will only give you 100 items. Well, that is acceptable if what the teacher is measuring is speed and accuracy, okay, in taking a tests. But if it's not, then that is not a good practice. Okay, we use a method in assessing students that requires smaller amount of time, but at the same time will give you a reliable and valid results. So you have to consider time required in administering the tests. Another one is the complexity of administering administering the tests. When choosing an assessment method, as much as possible, use a method that is not too complicated but not too simple. Okay, you have to make sure that directions and instructions must be clear and that little time and effort is needed in taking the tests. Okay, so that's complexity of administration. Do not complicate yourselves. Okay, or do not complicate the lives of your students when administering tests. Okay, take note that tests are given not to torture, not to terrorize your students, but as a way of gathering data which will help you make instructional decisions and at the same time improve your skill as a teacher. Okay, so it serves both the students and the teacher. That's complexity of administration. Okay, another is ease of scoring. So for ease of scoring, what does this mean? We have to use a scoring procedure that are appropriate to your method and purpose, of course. Then, the easier the procedure, the more reliable the assessment is. Okay? Um, kung mas madali no, yung pag-i-score natin sa test natin, there is a chance na mas reliable yung assessment natin. Okay? Just like what I said, do not complicate your life as a teacher. Okay? If you can come up with a scoring procedure that is easier to score and at the same time appropriate to your method and the purpose of the test, then go for it. Okay? Go for it. Kasi mas mahirap yung ang tawag dito, gagamit ka ng procedure na mahirap bigyan ng score. Okay, next, that's for practicality and efficiency. So we proceed now to the next, which is continuity. So we're done with practicality and efficiency. So we proceed to the next principle, which is continuity. Okay. Um, you must understand that assessment takes place in all phases of instruction. Okay. We discussed this in assessment in learning one before. And made mention that assessment takes place in all phases of instruction, meaning we can assess before instruction, during instruction, and after instruction. So, assessment done prior to instruction, we assess prior to instruction to understand cultural background, interests, skills, abilities, and motivations of the students. Okay, remember, your teachers in other prof ed subjects probably told you that at the start of the school year or the semester, the best thing that you're going to do is to get to know your students. Getting to know your students is an assessment done prior to instruction. Okay? Because you'd like to know their cultural background, what interests them, what skills do they possess, what are their abilities, and what motivations do they, or how are they motivated in learning. So those are the things that we need to know when assessing prior to instruction. Also, assessment done prior to instruction allows the teachers to articulate and clarify performance outcomes expected of the learners. So that's very important. Okay. So assessment also takes place during instruction. This is one we are very familiar with. Okay. So why do we assess during instruction? Okay. Simple. We just want to monitor learners' progress. Why do we monitor learner progress? To identify the gains and difficulties of the learners so that we can make adjustments. Okay, we can adjust. Okay, what adjustments are we going to make? Probably adjust the way we teach our students, the materials we are using. Okay, um, the strategies, techniques. Okay, or change the environment. Okay, baka medyo uh, terroristic yung approach mo, then you may change that into a friendlier approach inside the class. Okay, so those are the reasons why we um, assess during instruction. Okay, so um, it can also allow teachers to provide feedback as a form of motivation to learn. Okay, so while or during instruction, you gave them formative tests. So definitely, yung mga matataas makukuha na score dyan will be motivated to learn. And yung mga bababa will be motivated to catch up. Okay? So it's a form of motivation. Okay? How about post-instruction assessment? Okay? Post-instruction assessment, or this is an assessment after, it will allow the teachers to describe the extent to which each student has attained both short and long-term instructional goals. So an example of this are your periodical tests, quarterly tests, your major exams like prelim, midterm, and final exams. These are tests done at the end of instruction or post-instruction assessment. Okay, so we just wanted to um, know if our long-term and short-term goals, our objectives, are met. Okay, so that's what we wanted to find out. That's the reason why we have summative tests. Okay, assessment after instruction are also done to evaluate the effectiveness of the instruction, also the curriculum and the materials used by the teachers. Okay, so that's the reason why. So maybe if the results of the tests are low, then it would give you an idea that probably there are some lapses in instruction, okay, or maybe in the curriculum or in the materials used by the teacher, by you. Okay? So baka may mali, so you have to make adjustments later when you will be teaching again. Okay? So that's continuity. Again, assessment is performed um, before instruction, during instruction, and after instruction. Okay? And we have the last, which is positive consequences. Okay? Bear in mind that assessment methods are designed to have positive consequences to learners. Okay? What do we mean by positive consequences? It means that assessment must motivate the students to learn and improve their study habits. It should not be used to threaten the students. It should be used against the students. Okay? So, wag nating gagamitin ano. Sometimes I feel bad when I hear teachers say na pag maingay yung klase, maingay kayo, sige, magko-quiz tayo. So you are painting an image sa assessment as a form of punishment, which should not be the case. Okay? Tests or assessment should motivate them to learn and to improve their study habits. So teachers must see to it, therefore, or then, I mean, that assessment procedures are not used to embarrass students and to violate students' right to privacy. Okay? You are probably thinking of the names of your teachers who have been doing this to you. Okay? But I'm telling you this so that when you will become like us, teachers or professors, you are not going to repeat those mistakes or you're not going to follow the footsteps of those teachers na nasa isip ninyo ngayon. Okay? So, for teachers, it would help them improve the effectiveness of their instruction. That's the positive consequence of assessment for teachers. Okay? A way to improve the effectiveness of instruction. Okay, so I think I'm done with the principles of high quality assessment. So I guess it's time now for you guys to ask questions if you have questions. Okay. If you do not have questions, then just tell me if that you do not have any questions. So I know if I will end our lecture for today. Questions, anyone? Are you still there? So you guys can ask questions now if you have. Then if you do not have questions, then tell me that you do not have a question, please. So I know if I will end the live now or not yet. Okay. Looks like you guys are sleeping already. So no questions, says Elmer. Lahat ba? Wala? Parang walang tanong. So, I think, ayan. Wala na yatang tanong, ano? So, if there are no more question, wala. Ang gagaling, ano? Wala silang tanong. Okay, so maybe you understood the lesson, so kaya wala kayong tanong. So anyway, I'll see you again next time for the continuation of our lecture series. So since there are no more questions, then I think I have to wrap up this uh, live lecture discussion. So I'd like to thank you all guys for joining me. So just in case you guys are watching this, those who will be watching the replay of this lecture discussion, I encourage you to just leave a question, and when I see it, I'll answer them. Okay, I'll answer your questions. So that's about it for today. Thank you everyone for joining me in this live. I'll see you next time. Bye.